Now heed a tale of long ago, how it all started, that first great war. For centuries, tensions had been simmering between two factions of gods, the hedonistic Aesir and the Vanir, known for their connection to nature and magic. So Freyr, one of the Vanir's most revered leaders, attempted an act of diplomacy, travelling across the realms to teach the Aesir gods the way of the harvest, with accompanying spellcraft fit to feed all of Asgard. The Aesir were taken by Freyr's charm and ecstatic with the new powers he bestowed upon them. But such astonishing spells always have a downside, and the Aesir weren't about to blame themselves when things went wrong. Instead, the hot-headed Aesir cast their blame on Freyr. Furious at the unpredictable magic, they tortured and even attempted to kill him. But the Vanir god wouldn't be undone so easily. He escaped and fled back home to Vanaheim. His family was incredulous with anger at what had happened. They swore revenge against Asgard. And thus began the first and most barbarous war between the gods. Skirmishes between the Aesir and Vanir continued for centuries. Odin, the proudest of the Aesir, sought an end to the back and forth. So he assembled the largest army ever seen and marched it toward Vanaheim. Fear and deference cloaked the landscape as the Aesir soldiers stomped across it. But the king of gods had never lost a battle, and he surely never would. But as the throngs of troops descended upon the lush pastures of the Vanir kingdom, the fearsome army was falling back 2 steps for every advance it made. None could match the pure brute force of the Aesir attacks, but the merciless soldiers had never encountered so many Vanir gods casting Seidr magic at once. With colossal damage done on both sides, the Aesir eventually retreated. Odin's conquest had failed, and the warring factions of gods found themselves stuck in a stalemate once again. With Asgard and Vanaheim both ravaged, the two sides could only now consider what was once unthinkable: compromise. So Mimir, a particularly brilliant negotiator, was selected as the sole arbiter between the two sides, and he brokered an interesting solution. Freya, Freyr's sister, and the other leader of the Vanir would marry Odin, king of the Aesir. Struck by Freya's beauty, Odin readily agreed. But Freya spat at the thought. Odin had tried to destroy her home, her family, and everything she loved, and, oh yes, attempted to murder her beloved brother. Still, she couldn't let the chance for peace among the realms pass by. Though she barely managed a smile through the entire ceremony, the Aesir-Vanir wedding was cause for enormous celebration. As Odin took in his beautiful new wife, draped in the finest fabric and Vanir jewels, his kingdom felt nearly complete. As for Freya, well, with the promise of peace resting behind his curled smile, Odin didn't seem too terrible. The raucous party continued well into the night, with the sounds of celebration carrying throughout the kingdom. Yet the peace this union provided carried much further, rippling from Asgard to Jotunheim, Muspelheim, and every place in between. Married life for Freya was tolerable at first. She taught her husband Seidr spells, and though the high goddess of the Vanir missed her home, she was bestowed with new purpose here. But as Freya became more content, her husband only grew less so. Odin was consumed with the idea that Ragnarok, the battle said to end all things, was imminent. He claimed the giants were behind Ragnarok, insisting that if he could destroy the Jotnar, he could stop the apocalypse. But he wouldn't make the mistake of simply gathering his armies this time. Instead, Odin employed the greatest smiths in all the realms, the dwarven brothers Brock and Sindri, to create a weapon of unimaginable destruction. Once it was finished, Odin bestowed the mighty hammer Mjolnir to his son, Thor, and sent him out to slay every giant he could find. Thor accepted the task with glee. But Freya could no longer hold her tongue in the face of this genocide. She fought back, vowing to leave her husband and return to Vanaheim, even if it meant the chaos of war would overtake the realms again. Freya had nearly escaped out of Asgard's high gates when Odin saw her. She attempted to plead with him to just let her leave and to leave her people alone. But any sympathy Odin might have once had was, like his sanity, lost long ago. Instead, the king of the Aesir blindsided her with a Seidr incantation. When Freya had taught him magic, it always seemed he was only humouring her. But he must have studied further, for Odin came up with a particularly creative and cruel spell. It not only banished her from Asgard, but also forbade her from raising her hand in combat, even in self-defense. Freya stammered, trying to counter with a spell of her own, but now, instead of casting magic, she was suffering its twisted effects. She felt warm and tired as her vision blurred. She stumbled, and then it all went black. When she awoke, Freya found herself far from Odin, but more distraught than ever. Now war would surely return. And with the Aesir in possession of the masterwork hammer, the end of her marriage might indeed mean the end of her people. Now her only hope was that, in time, some brave soul would finish what she could not, restoring balance and peace to the realms.
Pre-order and get 3 shield skins for in-game.
PlayStation.
I originally came onto God of War because the animators for the game actually found me on YouTube. That kind of went viral, and then the animators saw it, and then they called me up directly. My name's Eric Jacobus. I did the combat motion capture for Kratos in the new God of War. And this is how you fight like Kratos. I would describe Kratos' fighting style as one that's very direct, straightforward, and never stopping. We would never retreat in the game. He's the God of War. You'd never retreat as the God of War. You're always going to move forward. Every single move that I did had to have that full rage. When the team asked me to audition, instead of coming down to LA and auditioning in front of a committee, why don't I just go in my garage and do what I've been doing in these fighting games and just do a Kratos move list? I made a little move list for Kratos where I do empty-handed combinations and I did the axe moves, Superman punches, Sparta kicks. We did a little bit of drop kicking. I had this training dummy that I beat up with the axe. It was kind of funny, you know? I put everything I had into it, you know, and I sent it over to them. Next thing I knew, they called me in to do a day of shooting.
Take 2, Mark.
Motion capture plays such an important role because it allows the animators so much more movement to work with. When you capture the right movement, you don't have to pull the camera back into God's eye view anymore. You can bring the camera in. As a gamer, when you're playing a game and you're that close to the main character, you suspend disbelief so much more quickly when the character moves like a human. The body's a series of pulleys. You can't really fake it at a certain point, especially when it's so close to the camera. Because this is one of the coolest jobs a stuntman could ever ask for. I mean, coming in and playing the God of War himself, you know, and just doing axe moves all day, and yeah, it's exhausting, sure, it's 8 hours of work, but, you know, a stuntman's body is built for this stuff. We really thrive when we're able to do full body moves like this. I would say that this sort of is the stuntman's dream.
Pre-order and get 3 shield skins for in-game.
プレイステーション